Hello and good morning. My name is Matt Cutler. You are with us as a part of the Tacoma Church's Sunday morning live stream. So welcome. I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners, the custodians, the stewards of the lands on which we're all gathered. The lands, the stewardship of the lands, the skies, the waterways. For us, in this part, it is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And for you, if that is different, I invite you to pay your respects, because we do so to honour and pay respects for their elders, both past and present and future, and to thank them for their profound stewardship and care of this land, the land on which we play and meet and learn. May we again, as a collective, commit to building a brighter future together. This morning is outside of Seasons of Creation, the month that we've just been a part of, but it is actually a kind of tag on Sunday. Today, as has been mentioned in the Facebook feed, thanks to Jess, it's the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi. Not many people know many saints if you're outside of the Catholic world. This, though, I would wager for many of you will be one of them, St. Francis of Assisi, definitely one of the more well-known. He is a stunning character, which I'll get to in just a sec. The journey we have been on in Seasons of Creation was to begin by considering that we are a part of a wondrous, enchanted, infused world, that whilst we want to build temples to hold the sacred, actually the whole thing is a temple. We've explored the ideas that we are deeply connected, that what I do affects you and others and all parts of this system, that we are deeply interrelated and therefore have a responsibility to each other, to further future generations, to those in the past. We have a connection because all things are interconnected. I wonder for you, as you think back through the seasons of creation, I'm interested what for you has been of significance when we think about this world in which we're a part, a living, breathing organism, a rich ecosystem of which we are deeply embedded, that we rely upon for our air, for the nutrients in its soil and plants, for all of what sustains life. I wonder for you what you found yourself reflecting on. I wonder what questions it's prompted about the way you express your relationship to the natural world, to this beautiful, enchanted universe. I have appreciated what should be for all of us a discipline to connect back in, to ask those questions about our connection, about our felt sense, but about how we express that connection. Do we live connected, or do we live out of step with the earth and with the natural world? Do we live out of a sense of interrelatedness? Do we live as though the whole thing is a temple? Do we live as though our actions and choices affect everyone because we are all connected? All of life is connected. As we've said, today is the feast day of St. Francis. St. Francis is a stunning character, and I appreciated at the worship planning meeting during the week learning a bit more through Richard. He's a guy who, for me, just captures so much that we find ourselves as a tradition returning to. He was someone who had a deep sense of appreciation for the natural world. He spoke about nature being a mirror of God. He spoke about the animals being brothers and sisters. He also did some stunning things where he spoke about his own woundedness, about his own humility. He used to wear robes with patches, not wanting to be lured by that pull of power and hierarchy and all that clergy and all institutions kind of sum it up. He chose to stay very grounded and humble, the everyday man. And all these ideas that he put out were threatening to the status quo, and done at a time where it wasn't necessarily popular to do so. He was a man who visited the Muslim world and would say things like, God is of the flesh. Again, not popular at the time. And he'd say, God is of the flesh. He lives in your nearest neighbour. He lives in every man. Pardon the non-inclusive language. But the sentiment that God is not bound or held within us folk, but in all things, in all people, in all creation. And again, at a time where it was not popular to necessarily name those things, some of the ideas threatening to the status quo. I want to ask you this morning, who are the voices of St. Francis for you? The voices that remind you of your connection to each other, remind you of your connection to the natural world, of your place in this enchanted temple. And who are the voices that speak unpopular truth, uncomfortable ideas that lure us back towards the way of love, when perhaps we have wandered off into the deep weeds? Who for you have been your voices, your St. Francis of Assisi voice? I'm going to offer you now a prayer in the form of a Barb McFarlane song. It is a mantra, it is a chant, it is a song that reminds us each of our interconnectedness, that we are birthed and born of the very elements to which we will return, and we rely upon this earth to be sustained. It's a deep song called The Earth My Body, helping you this morning feel your way into the reality that we are all one, that we are of the earth, not just on the earth. I'll offer it to you now, and then I will offer you the prayer of Francis of Assisi to start our service this morning.
Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath and fire my spirit.
Lord, make me a channel of your peace, that where there is hatred, I might bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I might bring light. That where there is sadness, I might bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one awakens to life eternal. Amen. As I've said, a month of season of creation, when we've looked at the forests and the land and of water, we have explored the wonders that we fall asleep to and forget. We have tried over this month to remind ourselves of our connection and our interrelatedness, but also, of course, to seek the elements of justice, to repent for the ways in which we are out of step with this wondrous earth. So it's been this kind of paradoxical month, as it should be, of awe and wonder, and then kind of gut-wrenching sense of responsibility and a questioning and critiquing around what are the ways in which I might be invited to live more in harmony with this wondrous world. And that will continue as we wrap up the service today. And a beautiful song I now want to move us into, continuing this sense of awe and wonder as we also summon up our questioning around, and yet what does it mean for me? Again, another Barb McFarlane song written by Barb. I offer that to you now.
This is the land I was born on. This is the land that birthed me. This is the land I arrived on. This is the land that received me. This is the land I was born on. This is the land that birthed me. This is the land I became on. This is the land that first saw me. This land will sustain me for the whole of my life. This land will receive me at the end of my life. This land will sustain me for the whole of my life. This land will receive me at the end of my life. Birth to growing, years are flowing in a cycle through life and death. This one soul has traveled far and still has journeys left ahead. I honor this land, this place where my feet and my heart were planted. I honor the first people who cared for this land for millennia, learned her secrets, and lived in right relationship with her. I honour the many souls who have lived on this land, cared for this land, and whose bones now lie within her. I honour my ancestors whose knowing is distilled in my blood. I honour the many souls who currently share this land and care for her. I'm grateful for her water and soil that nourish me. I honour the farmers, the permies and gardeners and all who have a hand in growing our food in a respectful, sustainable and gentle way. I honour those who come after us to care for this land, those who have been shown the good ways of working with the land and her energy, and who will respect and love her. This land will sustain me for the whole of my life. This land will receive me at the end of my life. This land will sustain me for the whole of my life. This land will receive me at the end of my life.
Thank you so much, Barb, and for your expression of gratitude that also captures what we're seeing in the Facebook feed. Just a shout out to thank you, Barb, and to Jordan, whose wonderful drumming you can hear in that track. It's wonderful seeing your Francis of Assisi voices, of seeing the David Attenboroughs, the John O'Donohues, the Mary Olivers, the David Whites, to seeing David Suzuki, to seeing our first Australians, to seeing the King Parrots, to seeing Claire Dubois, to seeing Bill Mollison and some other permaculturalists, and to seeing some regenerative farmers, these wonderful voices that are encapsulated in Barb's expression of gratitude, that return us, remind us, remember, help us remember of our deep connection. Yeah, and again, thank you, Barb, for that offering. We now move to everyone's favourite segment of the service, is Gail's choice of book that is particularly fitting this morning as we continue in gratitude and awe, but in also honest reflection of our place. We offer her book to you now. When I say her book, her choice of book, I should be careful to not have us all assume that Gail writes every book, lest we create a bar for Gail that she's unable to meet. But thank you so much, Gail.
The book we're reading today is called The Only Ones Left, and it asks some fairly important questions. This was written by Sandra Kendall, and the illustrations are amazing. The Only Ones Left. We share a home with marvellous creatures who scamper and scurry, rummage and saw. But what if we were the only ones left? All sizes, all colours, weird and fantastic, and rather plain. But what if we refused to share? Fragile, ferocious, timid, and brave. But what if we chop up the green, muddy the blue, and rubbish the rest? Elusive, extroverted, shy, and social. But what if we keep taking and taking for ourselves? Clever, industrious, busy, and patient. But what if we forget those lost forever? I don't think we can be all alone. No trees, no bees, becoming lesser and lesser. We need them. Our home is their home, and I think we can share. that's the end. In the back of this book, it tells us more about the story we've just heard. And I can read that too. We are lucky enough to share our world with a wonderful variety of animals and plants. Each sort has a role in the environment, even if very scarce, and each is very precious. It's as though we've been given a treasure by our grandparents to care for, then pass on to our children and grandchildren, something unique to the world that could be lost forever. But as there are more and more people, we need to grow more food and build more houses, and the homes of some species are lost. In Australia, we have also brought in animals like foxes and cats that the native animals have never learnt to live with. Already Australia has lost many animals and plants, so now we need to try hard to keep what is left. We have inherited the most wonderful array of plants and animals. Together we can make sure that they're all there for our children and grandchildren to enjoy and celebrate as well. And these are the words of Stephen Garnett, Professor of Conservation at Charles Darwin University. Sounds like a very wise man.
Forever on the Pulse, Gail Moncrief, a beautifully chosen book, a challenging book. I encourage you, if you're not doing it now, to read it with your children. Go back and watch that book and have a discussion around it and our place in this world. We're going to move to the text now. There are texts allotted for the Feast of St. Francis, who's known as kind of the father of the animals, and yet we're going to slip back into the lectionary. So it's almost a kind of hybrid. We're getting back into normal, everyday biblical life. But I think it's really fascinating. The parable of the lectionary, unbeknownst to seasons of creation, has thrown up at this time. Parables are classic examples of how we tend to read ourselves into it. We tend to make God the king character. We tend to find a way to make the parable suit us, to make it, not like the tribe that we don't like, or boost the things that we really want boosting in our worldview and in our belief system. And yet good parables have a way of kind of untangling that or exposing that. The parable we're about to hear, spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you what it is. It's the parable of the wicked tenants. The story goes like this. This group of people are given this vineyard to steward, to care for. And they abuse this, and then the owner of the vineyard moves off, goes around the country, and then sends back people to claim the money owed as the owner. A normal practice in those times. However, these greedy landowners beat and kill and knock out these servants, these voices that come to do what they're supposed to do. So that's kind of how the story rolls, and we'll hear it afresh. It's a story that really sadly has been used to kind of foster anti-Semitism, to basically say, because the final character is the heirs, it's the king or the owner's son he sends, who is also beaten. So there's this strong allegory we're about to see of, that has been used really badly for the Jesus followers say, look, you Jews didn't listen to the prophets and you didn't listen to Jesus, and that's what this parable is trying to tell you. And of course, that again is just one of those horrific ways that we use something that suits us to tell a story a certain way. That of course is what it's saying. This is the message because it's my message. However, parables are supposed to operate so differently. Parables are a form of discourse. That is, they're supposed to throw us off course. Parables, by their evocative language, surprising twists and turns and use of characters, are supposed to have us suddenly find ourselves in the story. And who am I and who are you and how does this relate to all things? It's supposed to get us deeply questioning ingrained beliefs. It's supposed to sneak past the ego and the rational mind to kind of evoke stabs and jabs that we actually need to attend to. So this is a passage that, as you will see, has strong allegory around prophets and Jesus. But I want you to try and suspend that and allow this to be a parable we hear and read today, and actually ask that it read us today. In light of the month we've just been on, in light of the season of creation, in light of all of what we've just talked about, our place in the natural world, I invite you to be read by this parable, to not do the harm that has been done with this text, and that's to use it for our own ends or to prop up what we think, but to let it read us, challenge us, question us, critique us, particularly in light of today. So a long-winded intro, set it all up for you. Let's hear it. Let's be read by it.
Listen to another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard. He put a fence around it, dug a wine press in it, and built a tower. Then he rented it to tenant farmers and took a trip. When it was time for harvest, he sent his servants to the tenant farmers to collect his fruit. But the tenant farmers grabbed his servants. They beat some of them, and some of them they killed. Some of them they stoned to death. Again, he sent other servants, more than the first group. They treated them in the same way. Finally, he sent his son to them. "They will respect my son," he said. But when the tenant farmers saw the son, they said to each other, "This is the heir. Come on, let's kill him and we'll have his inheritance." They grabbed him, threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. When the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenant farmers? They said, "He will totally destroy those wicked farmers and rent the vineyard to other tenant farmers who will give him the fruit when it's ready." Jesus said to him, "Haven't you ever read in the scriptures, the stone that builders reject has become the cornerstone? The Lord has done this, and it is amazing in our eyes. Therefore I tell you that God's kingdom will be taken away from you and will be given to people who produce its fruit. Whoever falls on this stone will be crushed, and the stone will crush the person it falls on." Now when the chief priests and the Pharisees heard the parable, they knew Jesus was talking about them. They were trying to arrest him, but they feared the crowds who thought he was the prophet.
Fascinating text then and now. Many scholars believe that it is very unlikely that those were in the lips of Jesus, that parable, in that form. It's quite possible there was a parable of sorts and it was adapted by the community. And scholars would suggest that for a few reasons. They'd say it's unlikely Jesus would speak so overtly about his own death, that he seems to have an understanding that there's a destruction of the temple, and also his use of the Greek Bible and all these other little threads make scholars suggest this is more likely the work of the Jesus community. As you do kind of biblical scholarship, you start noticing that the early Jesus community had a stunning sense of freedom to retell the story of Jesus for that time and for that place, in response to the specific challenges and questions that were emerging. For us to be true to the Jesus tradition, for us to be followers of the wisdom of God and of Christ, we too must retell the story of Jesus and ask the questions in light of the challenges and context that we are in today. How does wisdom, how does love speak its truth to us today? I find that parable deeply confronting, deeply convicting. If we hear it today, in light of the journey we've been on, is it possible we could read it like this? That we have been gifted something, that we have been asked to be stewards of this thing that has an abundance, that feeds and sustains, that has more than enough for all, that is gifted with a sense of responsibility. And yet, those of us who have a sense of stewardship and responsibility, rather than operating out of that paradigm, are instead hoarding it for its own gain. This doesn't feel like a distant parable. Instead, feels like a deeply convicting challenge to our place in our home and in the system of all things. You don't need to zoom out too far. You don't need to scratch your head too much to appreciate the ways in which we are, as a people, are exploiting the earth. You don't need to look too far to find evidence of the ways we are living beyond the means of the planet, out of step and out of harmony with what the planet is gifting and offering us. That we are distracted from the call of stewarding and caring and have become focused instead on our own greed, on our own comfort, on our own luxury. There are a million examples of the way in which our habits, our beliefs, our practices, our worldviews, our economic approach are totally out of keeping with what the planet offers us and with our role in it, totally out of step and out of harmony. What happens if we continue to operate on the trajectory we find ourselves on? But for me, there's another really challenging thing about this parable, and that is that these characters begin as stewards. And I choose not to see them as evil, insidious people who get in there and say, right, let's muck this thing up. Instead, I choose to see them as people like you and I, yet somewhere along the road and over time have found that personal gain builds traction and impetus. Rather than seeing these people as evil people, it's much scarier to see them as people who little by little allowed greed and comfort and self-interest to lure them away from their calling, luring them away from their place in the whole, away from equity, hospitality, from sharing, from interrelatedness. For me, that's a scarier challenge of this parable. So if we're to let this parable read us, we might indeed find it asking us some questions. Questions like, in what ways have we forgotten or fallen asleep to our place in the whole thing? How has the slow eroding escalation or tightening of greed and the lures of unhelpful habits and beliefs and expectations of comfort and security caused us to fall asleep to much deeper truths? In what ways have I forgotten my part here is to serve the whole, to keep in step, to live out of a sense of interrelatedness with this glorious temple? In what ways have I forgotten that we're all connected? And what do I do over here that affects people over there that I have become ignorant to? How is the thirst of this industrial capitalist machine that we are all propping up, how is it out of step with the planet and with all of its inhabitants? In what ways have we forgotten and fallen asleep? In what ways do we now find ourselves out of step with each other and the earth? The scary part of this parable, if I look at the characters in it, is their inability to hear the voice of truth when it comes knocking, to hear the voice of Christ saying, you need to turn around. For me, one of the scary bits about the parable is that when they are out of step, they have found themselves unable to hear the inconvenient truth. I'm sure you would all be familiar with Al Gore's documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. Who wants to wager a bet on when it came out? Who can remember? Feels reasonably, recent. 2006, 14 years ago. A documentary by a non-scientist, but someone who'd become aware of all these facts that scientists were talking about and put together a documentary about our impact as human beings, it's our impact on the planet, and called it An Inconvenient Truth. It is a powerful and provocative title. How well do you hear an inconvenient truth? And what is your response to it? Padraig Ó Tuama, who fascinatingly has come up in our Facebook conversation, thank you, Jess. He is an Irish poet and kind of peace builder. He talks about a conference he led. In this conference was a Christian who was a self-described fundamentalist. After participating in this conference for 2 days, he says, I have something to say. This Christian fundamentalist says, I have a question for all the homosexuals in the room. And Padraig, who is facilitating this 2-day thing, is tempted to say, well, as a homosexual, we don't like the use of that word. Yet he refrains and lets this man have his moment. And this man asks a question. He says, I want to know how many times since we've met together in the last while have my words bruised you? How many times have my words bruised you? And somebody next to him said, oh, you're lovely. You're very nice. And he said, no, don't patronise me. How many times have what I said bruised you? Or how have the words I've said bruised you? Someone else said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Someone else said after the first hour, I lost count. The man then said, so are you telling me that it is painful for you to be around me? Another member of the group, a woman in the room, said, yes, it is. I want to offer a thought experiment. If I told you that every piece of plastic that has ever been created is still in existence now, what response does that evoke in you? If I told you that your meat consumption is the one single largest contribution to your individual carbon footprint, I'd be interested what your response is. I don't want to tell you what to do in relation to those issues. The thought experiment is when we are confronted with an inconvenient truth, what happens in you? For this man at this conference, he is confronted by an idea that the way he has been operating is offensive to people, and seeks to take that truth and integrate it into his experience. What happens in you when you encounter an inconvenient truth? The reason that's important is, again, I don't seek to change your mind on plastic or meat. What I'd invite you is to explore some self-awareness, because when you do that, it will take you beyond climate change and the environment into relationships, into our relationship with our First Nations peoples, into the way you relate to people of other faiths, other political persuasions, other members of your family, other people of difference. What happens in you when you meet an inconvenient truth? I have been learning for me about the walls that go up, about the ways in which I protect those walls. I have been learning about the ways that I disallow messages and messengers of truth to enter in, to allow me to see what I need to see. I am slowly, my wife would say too slowly, becoming awake to the habitual security mechanisms that prevent me from hearing truths I do not want to hear. Through fear, it will cause me some questions that I may need to act upon. What happens in you when the voice of truth, when the voice of Christ comes knocking, luring you, convicting you of ways you are out of step with truth and love and life, and inviting you to ask questions that may cause a reorientation? This parable is not a story of back then. It's a story of what happens when living out of relationship with Spirit, when we are cut off from accountable, diverse community, when we don't have a pathway that self-critiques and challenges us, when we are not open to education and truth, when we cut ourselves off from questions and from diversity, when we are removed from the earth, we harden, we fall asleep. The lures of comfort and control, of our own bubble, of security and significance are always great. And we must ask, how do I fall asleep to truth? And how might I better welcome the voice of Christ, the at times inconvenient yet always love alluring voice of truth? May that parable read you in this moment. We now move into a time of prayer, and we thank Ross for leading us in that.
Embedded in most of the world's great faith traditions, there is a notion that humans have stewardship over the earth. And this is certainly true of our Christian tradition. For such puny creatures, it is amazing that we humans have come to dominate the world in an incredibly short time. And we truly do dominate the world, perhaps more than any other creature has in the past. But has this domination led to effective stewardship of the earth? Have we humans cared for the earth? The short answer, no. In fact, we have failed in our mission. In these past weeks, Matt has led us through the series called Seasons of Creation. We've had our attention drawn to the dire state of our planet. Our wonderful forests will soon be reduced to a mere memory. Our waterways are filled with plastic, microplastics, and even the trillions of insects are now disappearing. And the list goes on and on. If we continue to go down the path of ongoing destructions and species loss, destroying the web of life in which we live and which indeed sustains us, in the end, we are going to face our own extinction. And for, as our school children have told us, there is no planet B. The Earth is our home, our only home. It's all very depressing and we despair, but let's start by confessing to God. Loving God, we confess that we have failed in our stewardship of the earth. We are sorry. We confess that while most of us did not actively seek to destroy the planet, many of us stood by, not speaking up when our fellow creatures were being destroyed and even becoming extinct. We are sorry. We confess that we have failed the generations to come by handing on an earth that is indeed in a worse state than what we inherited. For this we are sorry. God of mercy, hear our prayer. But we Christians believe in a God of hope, and we have the audacity to believe in a God who will not give up on us and will answer our prayers in a time of need. God, we thank you that you have equipped us with the skills, intelligence, imagination, and the power of cooperation, and that we have the capacity to right the damage we have wrought upon the earth. We are indeed up to the task and can be true stewards of this beautiful world. Loving God, come and inspire each one of us to do our bit, to care for and save our lovely planet. Guide us in the patterns of our consumption. Help us to reflect on how we spend our dollars at the local supermarket and ask some simple questions. Do we need to have plastic labels on each apple we buy? Do the carrots need to have a polystyrene tray and be covered in plastic? Guide us when we consider disposing of our waste. Do toilet rolls need to be wrapped in plastic when paper will do? Paper can be recycled, plastic not so. Give us the courage to look at and embrace new forms of production, ones that fit the natural rhythms of the earth. The earth can teach us so much. After all, the leaves on trees are just photovoltaic cells. Give us the courage to abandon wasteful ways that cause the destruction of the earth. Help us to release our grip on treasures that we've stored up for ourselves. Help us to let go and share our wealth with our brothers and sisters. And join with us when we celebrate our victories, when we do restore parts of the earth. The car park that was has become a community garden. And we give thanks for those prophets, both past and present, who have called us to act to protect the earth. May we encourage future St. Francis of Assisi to rise up and keep up the call to protect the earth. Most of us by nature are not eco warriors, but give us the courage to stand behind and support those who are called to be so. And give us the courage to speak up against those who would engage in wanton destruction, not to condemn them, but to support and encourage them to seek new paths that are gentle on our home. Loving God, come, inspire each one of us to do our bit, to care for and to save our planet. Amen.
At worship planning during the week, we talked about liking the idea of encouraging each of us to make a commitment. Having been through the month and a bit we have been through, having thought about the beauties of our natural world and our place in it and connected to it, what is one thing you can do to express that responsibility of stewardship and your sense of interconnection? What is one step you can take? For some of you, it might be, I won't use plastic bags. I will look at plastic alternatives in my home. I will eat less meat. I will, et cetera, et cetera. I could name a billion things, from changing light globes to blowing up your tyres and ensure they're more efficient to ... There are a billion little things we can do. But your step might be, I want to learn more about. I want to be more open to learning about, etc. Your starting point might be education. But rather than getting overwhelmed and feeling overly responsible or guilty and therefore paralysed, this morning, choose one thing that you can do. It might be to change your superannuation, to explore who you bank with, the products that you purchase. It might be buying not the $20 broom from Bunnings that's going to go in the bin, but the $60 broom, because you know it will last longer and not end up in landfill as quickly. A small commitment. You're invited to write it in the Facebook feed or write it on a post-it note. Find a place of prominence in your home, your car, your fridge, your alarm clock, to remind yourself of your one step, your commitment. Barb was suggesting to write it on a piece of fabric and then tie it around your wrist or on your arm and carry it with you for a week. And perhaps after that time, tie it to a tree and let it flap as a prayer in the wind. Come up with your own way to make a commitment this week. In light of the fact that we are mid-French Open, allow me to offer you a quote from Arthur Ashe, whom the US Open's main stadium is named after, an advocate, an African-American athlete, the first to win a Grand Slam, who offered the wonderful quote. I want to find it so I don't fluff it. It is so simple and so beautiful. It is the call of this morning. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. That is the way to begin confronting the inconvenient truth. Whilst you're thinking about that, I offer you and a chance to write down your commitment. I offer you the final contribution by Barb McFarlane and some time to consider your commitment. Well, there it is. I didn't even need to try and remember it. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can.
We come from the forest, living in the forest. Go back to the forest, turn the world around. We come from the forest, living in the forest. Go back to the forest, turn the world around. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. We come from the mountain, living in the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living in the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Oh, so is life. We come from the spirit, living in the spirit. Go back to the spirit, turn the world around. We come from the spirit, living in the spirit. Go back to the spirit, turn the world around. Oh, so is life. 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 Oh, so is life.
Some quick announcements very quickly. We are mindful of those in our community who have not been particularly well. Lorraine has done something to her elbow, I think it was. Can't remember now. But either way, he's strapped up, he's casted for the next, he was kind of strapped up and unable to use her hands for the next kind of 6 weeks. Lorraine, we're very mindful of you. Glad you've got good care of your tribe around you. But I am mindful of the discomfort you are in. Marilyn Copeland has had some back issues during the week, so understanding she's doing a bit better, but of course, never a nice thing. So mindful of that. encouragement to watch Fight for Planet A if you haven't already, to continue the conversation around some small things you could do. Might have an invitation to a commitment you could make. Tuesday check-in, 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. on Tuesdays. Chance to see, connect. If you have not been, go to the Facebook group, not the Facebook page, the Facebook group. There'll be a link and it's posted each week, and clicking on it will send you into a Zoom room with all of us at Tacoma who are keen to connect as well. Looking for contributions on Hope for our Wilderness publication, please email them to the church office or Alison Howard. We would love and welcome any contribution. I have to apologise. Nerida's birthday skipped through last week. Wasn't aware that it was on the horizon. I think it's okay to say, Nerida, you were very open in Tuesday check-in. It was 75th birthday, so congratulations, and hope you celebrated. Having your sons around has been, one of whom is a chef, is a great way in COVID to celebrate. So happy birthday. On the 25th of October is the AGM. I don't have a slide for it, but it will be online. It will follow immediately on from the online service that we've got. Put it in your diaries, ensure you are there. We also need nominations for positions to get to the church office by 2 p.m. this Friday. There are a couple of vacancies coming up on council. Yes, some of our old guard who have held the fort for so long are vacating and creating some spaces. If you would like to nominate someone, 2 p.m. this Friday, it needs to be into the office. If you need to know how that works, what you need to say or fill in, speak to Sue at the office at tacomauc.com.org.au. I don't think I have any other announcements, just checking. No, which is wonderful. Yes, so again, thank you to those who have contributed for this service. That, of course, includes Barb and Jordan. It also includes Ross, whose contribution of the prayer was wonderful, and I really appreciate it, Ross, all the work you put into that. We are looking for more contributors in the prayer space. So if you are willing to read a prayer, write a prayer, do a Bible reading, please speak to us. We would invite wider contribution. But Ross, for your contribution this morning, we are really grateful. And again, for all the Facebook comments, it looks like there might be a bit of a technical issue. This is being recorded, and I think I'll be uploading it after the service, so that if you are not able to watch it currently, we'll find a way for that to happen. So until next time, friends, allow me to send you out. I will send you out with a blessing, with a prayer. There we go. Let me send you out first before I replay Barb's wonderful song. This is a prayer by Bruce Sanguin, an evolutionary mystic. In his book, If Darwin Prayed, he leaves this offering for us as we bring to a close our season of creation. We tune our ears to the wisdom of earth. It is deep prayer, this listening to her cries, as spirit sighs, too deep for words. Unborn generations call to us from the future. What did you do when the planet could no longer bear your foolishness and began to break? The growl of the grizzly caught in the crosshairs of trophy hunters and policymakers who seem to prize extinction is a plea for the rights of all the disappearing ones. Hear the yelp of the pygmy possum asking for protected habitats and chemical-free water to drink. The Gouldian finch's whistle, once joy's message, is now a haunting lament for the dwindling chorus of songbirds. The topsoil, living organism and not lowly dirt, clears its thinning, chemical-burned voice and speaks out for the bionic kingdom teeming within this dark, body. Mother Ocean beckons us to return to her womb, that we might be born anew, and know our salty tears to be her own. The willow drops her loving arms around our shoulders and brushes us with grace, whispering that it's not too late. It falls to us, wisdom's pupils, to return this dirge into a dance of the cosmos. Let those with ears to hear rise up. Amen. May you go gently on the earth. May you walk openly with each other. And may you remain open to the voice of truth, luring us all towards love. Amen.